Hello everyone, and welcome to our first episode of our documentary series, Backyard Biology with Brittney
and Brooke. In this series, we'll give you a glimpse into the life of animals living right outside your door.
Today, we'll be looking at the mysterious fish, one that has been around from the age of the dinosaurs and looks as though it came from another planet, the sturgeon of the Atlantic.
Is that a bird or is it a bat? What's over there? What is that? Scurry about, let's have a look. Backyard Biology with Brittney and Brooke.
Sturgeon, an awe-inspiring, ancient group of fish that is rarely seen by people. It is hard to imagine that this majestic creature exists here in the Maritimes, yet they also live throughout the Atlantic Ocean, from up north in Newfoundland to down south in Florida, and even previously across the pond to Europe.
But these unique animals are increasingly threatened in Canada and endangered throughout the US. To understand why sturgeon have reached this point, we need to look at the intimate relationships they have had with us humans, from our fascination with them as a species to our historic and present interactions.
But first, let's take a look at the biology of the sturgeon, looking at where they live and what adaptations they possess that has allowed them to survive virtually unchanged for almost 100 million years.
Now, let's head to the Biology Museum at Acadia University for more understanding. Here in the Maritimes, we have three different species of sturgeon: the Atlantic, the short-nosed, and the lake sturgeon. In this episode, we are going to primarily talk about the significantly larger saltwater sturgeon. One of the most significant facts is that the sturgeon is anadromous, meaning that it regularly lives in saltwater, the ocean, but will migrate upstream in freshwater rivers to spawn. Spawning is when the females release their eggs and the males come along to fertilize them.
But one of the most obvious features of the sturgeon is its size. Sturgeon vary in size based on what species they are, but they easily measure over 1 meter in length.
Now that wouldn't quite fit in your standardized fish bowl.
No, definitely not. There's even a record of one sturgeon measuring up to 4.3 meters in length. That's 2 Shaquille O'Neals, or the length of a truck. These fish have plenty of time to reach this size, living for about 60 to 100 years. Now, it's not uncommon for fish species to reach this size, but one particularly unique feature of sturgeon is their modified scales.
Most fish that we can think of would usually have scales, but sturgeon, like this juvenile here, have 5 rows of bony plates called scutes. These scutes help the sturgeon defend themselves from predators, especially in juveniles. Juvenile sturgeon have very sharp and hooked scutes that act as a warning to predators, saying, "I'll be sharp and a nasty meal, you better stay away." As sturgeon age, their scutes wear down, but still serve as an armor plating on their body. Did you know that scute is actually Latin for shield? And the coolest part of all of this? Scutes have evolved long before normal fish scales did. And this shows just how long sturgeon have been around.
I don't know about you, Brittney, but sturgeon are getting more interesting by the minute.
I guess this is why there's so much human interaction.
Our interest in sturgeon hasn't always been helpful to them, though. The first records of commercial sturgeon fisheries began in North America almost 200 years ago, and has caused population declines of 50 to 90% in different areas, thereby resulting in their increasingly threatened status. As a result of these population declines, our government, as well as that in the United States, have begun focusing their efforts on conservation, while also restricting commercial and recreational fisheries.
These fishery restrictions exist even to this day, especially in the US, where there is a complete ban on the fishing of sturgeon. However, in Canada, there are still some active sturgeon fisheries. They are limited, mind you, but they are based in Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. These fishermen must use specific nets when fishing sturgeon. They are not allowed to fish during the month of June because it is thought to be when the sturgeon spawn. They are not allowed to keep any sturgeon that is under 120 centimeters in length. All of these restrictions apply to both commercial and recreational fishing.
Now we'll be taking a look at how sturgeon are fished for caviar and meat in the Maritimes. Sturgeon swimming around in the Bay of Fundy are targeted using something called gill nets. Gill nets have holes about the size of a sturgeon's head so that the net gets caught around, you guessed it, their gills. The fisherman sets out the nets and leaves them for a while to wait for the sturgeon to come along. He'll then return to check the nets by pulling them up by hand. Once the nets are pulled in, any sturgeon that have been caught are untangled and checked for maturity. The fisherman only takes mature, female sturgeon back to their facility for processing. For him to be able to take the sturgeon, it has to be the right length. Sturgeon are measured, and only those longer than 120 centimeters are allowed. Females of the right length are then tested to see if their eggs, called roe, are mature. A large needle is inserted into the females and removed. He'll then check the roe to see if it's the right color and size. If so, the sturgeon is kept. These sturgeon of the right maturity are tagged and remain on the boat. The sturgeon that are not the right maturity are released back into the water. The kept sturgeon will be brought back to the fisherman's facility, where the fish have to be killed to collect their roe. To make caviar, the roe is then pickled. Caviar is considered a delicacy, and sturgeon caviar is so rare that a serving for one person, which is just one bite, costs around $100.
Given the stresses on wild sturgeon populations, 2 aquaculture businesses have been created in New Brunswick. This means that sturgeon are being raised in captivity on a fish farm. The goal of these businesses is to sustainably provide sturgeon for meat and caviar while not harming wild populations. Their products can be found at your local stores, such as at Pete's Grocer. Sturgeon meat is worth $25 per fillet per kilogram. Now, sturgeon caviar is where the money is really at. 1 kilogram of sturgeon caviar is worth $1,700.
And ain't nobody got time for that.
All in all, sturgeon are very valuable fish. It is hard to imagine at times that sturgeon live in the waters here. In our Bay of Fundy backyards. But just because we can't see them doesn't mean that they are any less important to conserve.
The fishing restrictions that have been implemented thus far have been a great start to sturgeon conservation. However, there are other factors that contribute to the decline in sturgeon population. In particular, water pollution and the use of dams and rivers that would block sturgeon passage, which ultimately limits where they go to spawn and their survival.
In order to more effectively conserve these species, scientists are working hard to better understand them. Let's take a closer look.
Some researchers from Acadia University, as seen here on this boat, are tagging and measuring sturgeon to figure out what the populations are like here in the Bay of Fundy, as well as where the sturgeon are moving in the bay and surrounding areas. This information tells us about the movement of sturgeon and helps give us information about the status of populations in the area. The more we learn about these gentle giants, the better we'll be able to work with our government for improved conservation.
To get an expert's opinion on how each of us can be of help, we talked to a prominent sturgeon researcher of Acadia University, Dr. Mike Stokesbury.
Sturgeon. What would you be able to suggest that our audience and the public would be able to do? How could they get involved? What could they do to help conserve sturgeons?
I'd say for kind of a younger group of people, the best thing would be for them to be informed. For them to actually, read the news about sturgeon, or invite graduate students or professors in to talk at their schools and things like that, to really kind of promote knowledge. I know you're going to talk to kids about water quality and really important things like that. So those are things that we want to do for kind of all species. We want to be good stewards of the environment and things like that. And at this point, I think that just kind of being aware that those sturgeon are out there and kind of keeping that in mind when you're, when you or your parents are making decisions about whether to support tidal power or, having a discussion about, different things we might do to the marine environment that might affect their habitat. So I think it's just really important right now just to be informed.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Stokesbury.
So let's take it from the expert and remember that each of us can make a difference in sturgeon conservation.
Become an advocate for sturgeons and other species at risk by raising awareness for their conservation. Keep our oceans and rivers clean by not littering in our waters. And should you or your friends accidentally catch a sturgeon, make sure to release it alive and unharmed.
Well, that's it for this episode in our documentary series, Backyard Biology with Brittney
and Brooke. Stay tuned for our next episode where we take a look at the elusive Soren, a species known for his stripes and cargo pants, and whose in-class tangents can take you to another world.
Is that a bird or is it a bat? What's over there? What is that? Scurry about, let's have a look. Backyard biology with Brittney and Brooke.